The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another vBrownBag episode. We've got a fantastic guest for you guys tonight with Kyle Ruddy presenting for Python for PowerShell-ers. So, quick notes for everybody. We've got the vBrownBag Twitter accounts here, as well as the Twitter hashtag. If you guys have questions for us and things you want to get into the presentation tonight, go ahead and at vBrownBag or hashtag vBrownBag, and we will grab those as well as the questions that are coming live from everybody in the audience. Again, presenting tonight, we've got Kyle Ruddy, who is the transport for Kyle Ruddy's Beard. I'm Joe Hughes, and we've also got Ken Nalbone. Ken, say hi to everybody.
Hi to everybody.
All right, Kyle, it is all yours. You ready to go, sir?
Sweet, I am ready. I also quite enjoyed your Freudian slip there of, having a great host.
Yeah.
Not so much the presenter, but all about the hosts.
Totally.
All right.
Take it away, sir.
There it goes. Show my screen. We're going to see how PowerPoint decides to treat me tonight. So, should see VS Code.
We do.
And should see black screen. And hopefully you see
Project Redacted.
vBrownBag deck.
Yep.
All right.
Good to go.
Do you see this GoToWebinar control panel? Or is that only for me?
No, I think it's only on your screen.
Sweet.
You're signing as organizer.
Okay. Good deal. All right. So let's kick this off. Thank you, Joe and Ken, for hosting tonight. Much appreciated. Shout out to Chris Williams for really starting this series and driving basically driving the attendance, driving the hosts, voluntolding all the things to all the people. So shout out to Chris. Originally, I was supposed to give a session quite a few months ago. I had to cancel and reschedule quite a few times. So my original one was about a project that I've been working on. Some of the engineers at VMware have been working on. However, it's pretty much to the point where I don't think it's going to be something to really be shared this year. So we're going to move on and talk about something different. So this particular session is going to be a PowerShell-ers guide to Python. And I'll get into a little bit about why that's important here shortly. First, a little bit about me, the person that's here, this voice that's coming to you over the internet. My name is Kyle Ruddy. I'm a senior architect who works for VMware. I focus particularly on all things that are API, CLI, and SDK when concerning the use of vSphere as well as VMware Cloud on AWS. Most people probably know me for PowerShell and PowerCLI usage. However, we're doing a lot of work on some of the SDKs that are out there. So that brings me to doing a lot more work that's focused more on things like Python, Ruby, and Java. So outside of that, love the community, love doing stuff like this at the vBrownBag. So if it's something that I can share in paragraph form, it's out there on my blog. It's something that's code, such as a lot of the demos that will be in this session. Those will be out on my GitHub repo. Of course, love vBrownBag. I'm also a occasional host, and then Twitter is definitely my social media stream of choice. So if you have any questions, comments, things of that nature, KM Ruddy, and then if it's anything that concerning about this, just hit it with the hashtag vBrownBag. And then for all of these contributions and things that I've done, I've also been recognized as I believe I'm an 8-time VMware V expert. And I am now a second-year Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management group.
Huzzah!
All right, so One of the things that Ken and I and Joe were talking about a little bit earlier was about vMugs. And this year, one of the things that I've been doing is giving a session as a keynote at quite a few vMugs. I think I've done 5 already this year, and I still have 4 more to go in the second half. And it's the discussion is around how do I, as a former VI admin, or what I'm assuming is a majority of the audience as VI admins, how do they kind of transfer or translate some of these skills that they already have into something that's maybe more current isn't the right word. I'll get my marketing hand slapped for that. But basically, how do we get from the points of where we are today into where a lot of things are, or a lot of people are talking about going, the whole quote unquote DevOps culture. And one of the big things that one of my big takeaways from that keynote deck is at the end is, trying to find a common tool set in between your teams, right? So, one of the core concepts around DevOps is, eliminating silos, trying to work together in between teams, trying to work better in between, management and developers and infrastructure teams or system administrators. And so what I mean by finding a common tool set between teams is, when I was growing up on the, on the customer side, I guess, everything that I was doing was really more focused on either VMware or Windows Microsoft-based technologies. So it was very clear that PowerShell was really the way to go. It was certainly the easiest to learn. It was the easiest. It was the most extensively supported automation tool available. And so a lot of the sysadmins that I talked to, and having been one, PowerShell was where it was at. However, you kind of step outside of that system admin role, and you're not seeing as much PowerShell adoption. You're seeing folks who are using either, back then it was C# and maybe Java, JavaScript. Today we're seeing a whole lot more Python, Ruby, Go, all kinds of crazy stuff. And really, so the idea behind this finding a common tool set in between teams is, being able to, take, not only your resources and being able to share them amongst other people, breaking down those silos, and being able to kind of translate what you have into something that they can understand, and vice versa. One of the stories is always about, I used to work with a storage team quite a lot. Things with VMware and storage and potential issues kind of went hand in hand, and storage team was all Python based. Sysadmin, as I've said, was very PowerShell based, and it was really kind of cool for me to start learning Python, and that's kind of what we're here to kind of show some of the tips and tricks that I've learned so far. However, outside of that, not just taking it from me, but Dan here had a tweet that actually caught on like wildfire, actually, which was basically just an alarm almost to IT professionals, kind of diversify what you know today, because that's going to make you more marketable. So, taking it away from what some of the things that I've been talking about, which is, how to make your intercompany teams work better. This is taking a look at, how can this help you in your career? Because the more skills that you have, the more languages that you learn, the more ground that you can cover. So with that, let's dig right in. So I have slides, and then I have demos. So we have a couple scenarios to go through, and then I'll switch over and try and do some demos. It'll be interesting to see how my screen sharing works for that, but we're gonna give it the old college try. All right, so if you're I should also say, if you are somebody who is very well versed in Python, like, don't turn this off. You might actually learn something about PowerShell. Although if you're somebody that's looking for some more advanced topics around Python and maybe even PowerShell for that matter, I'm going to be scratching the surface on some of the nuances in between the languages. And then if there's enough need for it, I'm more than happy to come back and dive a little further into some of the use cases here. But so first and foremost, case sensitivity. Like this is one of those big things that from the system administrator side, kind of, you never had to worry about it. It doesn't matter if you type out a variable or a commandlet, you can change the capitals, every other letter. PowerShell's not going to care. However, when you come into the Python, the world of Python, it very much requires you to follow that use case or follow the usage of capitalizations. And this kind of lines up with the Zen of Python, which I believe Chris Williams in the overview, as well as some of the other presenters in this series have already discussed. But the piece of Zen of Python for this case is explicit is better than implicit. Basically meaning, if you use that case, you have explicitly stated that you want to use that capital or lowercase letter. And so that's going to continue forward. It's not going to allow you to switch up. So let's see if we can, whoops, let's go back one there. Oh, you're going to make me quit the, oh, PowerPoint. Okay, so here on our left side, we have our PowerShell. Here on our right side, we have some Python. I have 4K resolution on these monitors, so I apologize if you can't see it. I'll zoom in as much as possible to try and figure out what actually works.
It looks pretty good.
Looks good?
Yep.
Sweet. All right, so let's start on just creating a standard variable. So on the PowerShell side here on the left side, I've highlighted just a $, vBrownBag, hello vBrownBaggers from PowerShell. I'll cover variables here in a little bit, but for the use case here, that's just accept that fact for what it is. All right, my run command button is not so happy with me, so we'll do that, do this old-fashioned way. All right, so we have our variable that has been created here. So if we just run, $VBB, we get back hello vBrownBaggers from PowerShell. Now, what happens if we change the case? If you're not familiar with PowerShell, this is kind of important. So again, I can type it in $lowercase VBB, and it still gives me back the same thing. Well, what if I change the whole thing to being uppercase? Again, you get the same thing back. Now, when you take that understanding and you transfer that over to Python over here, and again, I'll cover a little bit about variables in a second. But let's just take this one here. Sweet, it ran it on the wrong side. Consistency. All right. Oh, I see what it did. Okay. Try it again here. So here, right here, we're in our Python terminal here. I just entered in VBB equals hello vBrownBaggers from Python. To call out or display your variables, you have to use the print option here. So let's do this properly. So print lowercase v, capital BB, we get hello vBrownBaggers from Python. All right, so what happens if we change our case here? So we'll do all lowercase first. We get an error. Name VBB is not defined. So let's say B, hello, Ken and Joe. And sorry, I can't scroll over there. So look at the bottom right-hand side there. So we've now created our lowercase VBB. We can do print VBB, and now it works. So we went from before having an error, then we created it, and then we're now back to having something that prints out. Lastly, we'll do all uppercase, try and do a like for like, and again, we're met with our nice and friendly error here. Okay, let's pop up our PowerPoint again here. All right, there we go. So let's move on to our next kind of big change that, you know, it's something that that as somebody who's used PowerShell a lot, almost take for granted. So indentation. So, you know, when you're creating scripts or when you're creating modules or anything of that nature, you know, indentation is a nice to have in PowerShell. It helps readability. But on the Python side, it's actually a requirement. You know, this is how they establish some of the grouping in between some of the different areas. That's part of the structure. So again, Xen Python, this goes back to readability counts. So let's exit out of the PowerPoint deck and go to our example 2 here. So here on our left-hand side here, this is again PowerShell. So we have we just have a standard loop. So it's going to count out a, oops, go back. It's going to count out 1 to 5 basically. And it does not like my shortcut key here. It's very disappointing. Oh, and it doesn't actually count out to 5 because I did less than instead of less than or equal to. All right, so there on our left-hand side, we've done that. We have our readability indents right here on the PowerShell side. So what happens if we take out those indents? So again, we get the exact same thing. For the folks who try and do these themselves, I'll change that to less or equal than. So now we have 1 through 5. So, you know, everything is still good. It's all in still a pretty good spot. Moving over to our right-hand side here, taking a very similar loop, you know, creating our A variable up here with a 1, and then just doing a while loop until it is either equal to or while it's less than or equal to 5, I'm going to continue running through this loop. So we're going to run that there. So we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if we change that and we remove our indentation here, you know, right there, just on the first line after our colon there, it says, you know, hey, you're trying to call print here, and we're expecting an indented block. So it's going to tell you, you know, hey, this is not acceptable. So it, you know, at least it gives you a pretty intuitive error message, so you can pretty much have a good understanding of what's happening and what needs to be resolved.
So Kyle, we have a question about indentation.
Yes.
Graham wants to know, does the Python plugin for VS Code handle the indentation properly and correctly?
Yes, it does. So here for an example, going back to our loop here that has no indents, if we hit enter, it's automatically tabbed over for you. So, you know, if you create this without indents, like, you did it on purpose.
There you go, Graham.
It was either, you know, user error or copy paste failure or, you know, something of that nature, because VS Code's going to do it for you. All right. So let's move on to our next point here. Now we're going to talk about variables. So I've kind of broken the cardinal rule of showing you something before I actually talked about it. So let's talk variables. This is the ability for you or somebody to create something that's reusable. You can recall this certain object. Both PowerShell and Python are object-based languages. So you can recall an object very easily without having to run another API call or run a new command. You can get that back in a repeatable fashion. So variable thing with PowerShell, all variables are declared with a $sign. Now, as you've seen, it's a little different on the Python side. That variables can actually start with a letter, uppercase, lowercase, and it can also actually start with an underscore. Now, the one big cardinal rule to this is that there are some protected words that you can't use, that Python will not let you modify. So be aware of that if you run into something along those lines. And going back to Zen of Python, I don't know that this is really I wouldn't call PowerShell's method complex, but this is something that's fairly easy and straightforward to know on the Python side. And the one thing that I should call out, because I didn't call it out on the slide, numbers do not work as variable names, and we'll see that here in some examples. So moving on to example 3 here. On our left-hand side, we have our PowerShell. So we're going to create a variable. Stop lagging. Don't do this to me. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're going to create our POSH or PowerShell shortened variable. We're going to use write output to output the what's contained in that POSH variable. As a result, we get out PowerShell. So what happens if we do that without the $sign? We get a nice red block of text saying, hey, this is not recognized as a commandlet, function, script file, or operable program. So that's one of the things with PowerShell where if you don't use that $sign, PowerShell's not even going to bring up that this might be a variable. It's trying to assume that this is a commandlet or a function or something of that nature, not that it's a variable.
Man, that's amazing. Kyle's PowerShell console hates me as much as mine does. That's just fantastic.
And then so the last one, what happens if you happen to call out a variable that doesn't actually exist? Nothing happens. There's no output. That thing means nothing right now. So let's move over to the Python side here. We're going to create a variable, uppercase P, lowercase y, store in there Python. So as a result, we can see that Python was printed out there. So what if we change and do a very similar command as what we did in PowerShell here, where we take vBrownBag and store in there Joe is tonight's host. Print vBrownBag, and we see Joe is tonight's host. Well, let's move down here. There's another way that we can create variables here. Starting off with an underscore is kind of a weird thing from my background. However, it works. So underscore VMworld, we've stored in there a string, the countdown has started, then we use print to output it, and it works properly. So next, let's try and use a number just for the, I've already kind of cheated and told you what's going to happen, but let's do it just in case. So in this case, we see we have a syntax error that we can't assign something we can't assign this literal value. So again, if we do print 42, because it's a number, it still works. We haven't changed it, it's a number. So if we actually change this over and do a print Joe H, which remember we haven't set this as any kind of variable. We haven't stored anything into it yet. So we get a very similar error saying, hey, Joe H, it's not defined. So there's nothing to print. Here's an error. So let's go back to our PowerPoint here. Click through that. So next up, when you're looking through some of the core concepts of both PowerShell as well as Python, modules are kind of the next big thing. So how do you take what you already have, what already exists in your installation of either PowerShell or Python, and use it against more things? How do you, make it a little more user-friendly? How do you access things or make better use of things that other people have created and shared? So on the PowerShell side, the important thing to know here is that as a PowerShell, I believe version 4, it will automatically import modules based on the commandlet it's called. Then on the Python side, you do still have to manually import it. However, one of the nice parts about Python is that you can actually import bits and pieces of certain modules. You can import certain packages, and that kind of goes to the usability, as well as every time you load in a module, that's something that lives out in memory. So this comes back to the Zen of Python, which is sparse is better than dense, because when you do those sub resources, or when you import only the things that you need, your footprint, your resource footprint is going to be less. So jumping back out to our, oh no, I just closed it.
Kyle?
Yes.
This may be a question for the end, Graham says, but I'll just pop it in since you stopped talking briefly. He wants to know, is there any way to call Python modules from PowerShell so you can make use of some of the public Python libraries?
Good question. That depends on how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. I mean, if you want to be in PowerShell and import a Python library, that's not going to work, and vice versa. Neither one of those are going to work. However, in certain cases, you can use, at least I'm familiar with how to use PowerShell in order to interact with Python. So, if you're in, say, if you're on a Windows box, which I probably should have had up already, but, if you install Windows or Python on a Windows box, which I believe it's actually there by default now in some of the brand new versions of Windows operating systems that are out, you can, from your PowerShell window, call Python things. So you can call a Python script from PowerShell. In certain cases, like putting on my back on my VMware hat here, we can send through PowerCLI, which is VMware's PowerShell set of PowerShell modules, we can send scripts through to guest operating systems through VMware tools. And as part of that, PowerCLI can send through Bash scripts, Python. I believe Luke Deakins has even done a couple other languages, which is kind of mind-blowing. But those are different ways that you can use the two languages to kind of interact with each other. All right, so if there's any follow-up, let me know. But I was able to find my script since I accidentally closed it there. So over here on the left-hand side here, we have our PowerShell again. We're working with modules. So if I do a get module, this is going to list out all the modules that have been imported into my current working session. So currently it's just you know, 2 PowerShell modules and a PS read line. Then if I do a find module VMware.PowerCLI, wait, this is the raw. Oh, well, we're going to just do this one live because I don't think I finished the script. So let's do a get module name. We're going to see if I have PowerCLI installed on this system. So in this case, we have it installed. It's available. If we choose to, we can import it and make use of it. And since I was talking about it automatically importing, let's do a get VM. So let's cancel out of that. So I didn't even run get VM. I literally just tab completed it. So let's do a get module now. Oh, and of course it cheated me. So let's actually run the get VM. Excuse the error there. But if we do a get module now, there we go. Now we have all these VMware modules that were imported just because I hit the enter button on get VM there. So on the Python side over here, we're going to make use of the random module, which this is something that's installed by by default. So if we just call out something that should work, random.randrange, just saying that, hey, we want a random number from a range of whatever we input, which in this scenario was 100. So that has an error. It says random has not been defined. So this kind of looks like that our error that we saw above, saying that Joe H is not defined. So right now Python is kind of thinking like this is this might be a variable. Same thing if we call out just randrange. So what happens if we actually import the module? Here, let's do both of these lines. So we ran the import. Now if we rerun our random.randrange 100, running that a couple times, we get different numbers that are within 0 to 100. However, I was talking about how we can import sub-resources as well. So what if we didn't want to call out random.randrange every single time?
Kyle?
And this is, yes.
I don't have a question. I just want to point out the first random number you got was 42. And that's a good
I did greatly enjoy that. I could not have done that any better if I tried. 42, amazing. I probably shouldn't have even ran any more, just left it at that. Like, yeah, I did that on purpose.
Yeah. It's all the beard. It's all the beard.
Congratulations. We'll just call it a night now.
And we're done here. So if we wanted to import a subset of this entire random module here, so let's I'll show you that this is still unpopulated right now. Rand range still not defined. So if we import this line right here, we can now see that rand range works all on its own. So we have imported only that particular piece. It doesn't matter how many times I run this, I'm not going to get 42 again. So I'm very deeply saddened by that. But at least we got it once on the first time. All right, let's jump back to our deck here. All right, so we already talked modules. Let's move on. All right, so I showed some things that were already installed by default. But what happens if it's something that is provided by the community, or it comes from a third party or something like that. How do we get those modules onto our local system? So in the PowerShell world, there's something that's known as the PowerShell gallery. Underneath the covers, it's NuGet, and for the user, you can install something just by typing in install-module. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Luckily, Python has the exact same thing. For them, it's called PyPy, or the Python package index. And this makes use of a command that's called pip. So instead of doing an install module, in Python, it's pip install. And this is not a comparison between PowerShell and Python for our in a Python moment here. This is just saying both of these are simple. And if you've been around PowerShell for a long time, you know it hasn't always been this simple. We're kind of spoiled here lately. So going back to our examples here. Oops. Let's get our scrolling action here. Get over to example 5. So let's see how this works. So we're going to open up, just take a quick look at what the PowerShell gallery looks like. Chrome is working super slow. However, it did open my other screen here. Apologies again for the resolution. But so this is what the PowerShell gallery looks like. You can search through anything that exists out there. So something that I'm quite proud of here recently in the PowerShell world is the VMware.vSphere DSC module. This is out there. All you have to do is just install module, name VMware.vSphere DSC. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let's go back to our VS Code here. So say we wanted to install that thing. We already saw that it's out there, it's available. Just to verify that I don't already have this on this system, we can do a get module -list available. Doesn't show up. In order to install it, you just run install module. The command that was written out there on the screen. It takes a couple seconds depending on the size of the packages that are involved. Oh no, did it fail? Oh, live fail. Live demo fail. Theoretically, that should work. Anyways, let's move on over to our. Hopefully, for most of our viewers, PowerShell Gallery is a known entity already. So let's do the similar process over here for Python. We're going to use our web browser module here. We're going to import that and tell our web browser to do a get, which is going to be opening up a program, which is our Chrome path, which is our variable here that points to Google Chrome, and then we're going to call the open method here to actually open it and point it to that URL of pypy.org. So going back out, this is PyPy. Looks vaguely familiar, doesn't it? Ooh, very familiar. Okay, so so even that transfers quite nicely. So let's search for something that is some folks' favorite, quote-unquote favorite SDK when it comes to working with VMware technologies, and that's PyVMami. This is a Python SDK that works with the VMware SOAP API or the Web Services API. Same thing, just different ways to clarify or qualify. So on here, we also still have our installation procedure, pip install -- upgrade PyVMami. So let's head back to our Visual Studio Code session here. We can use pip list, which actually I need to exit out of our Python session here. So we can use pip list to show all of the packages or modules that are installed here. So we've got all kinds of stuff. But, you know, because we're in a terminal session, we can use grep. So we can see nothing was returned. We don't have pyvmami there. So if we go ahead and run pip install, see it's going through and downloading. In the bottom right there is just saying, hey, by the way, we successfully installed pyvmami 671. So if we go back to our list command here, boom, we now have pyvmami 671 that's listed in our pip list. So just to verify there, pip list is equivalent to get modules / or dash list available. So let us
we have not a question, but a comment from one of your hecklers. Ariel wants you to know that if you had tried to install V documentation, it would not have failed.
Okay.
Oh.
So
I like this. Let's test that theory.
Uh-oh.
oh, it's there.
Good job, Ariel.
There you go.
Look at the heckler coming through. See, that's why I like hecklers. Every now and then they provide something useful.
You know, it's too bad Chris isn't here, though, because I remember last time it was Chris and Ariel hosting you, where Ken and I were troubleshooting your API walkthrough.
Yeah. That one was fun. We learned some stuff.
Good memory. I forgot about that.
All right, so moving from modules into scripts here, let's take a first look at parameters. So this isn't something that everybody uses on the PowerShell side, but it's something that I feel that once you kind of graduated to a certain level, like parameters are something that you should be using. It allows you to make your code reusable, and that is absolutely something that Python hinges on. So when you're creating a script or even a module, or rather a function, there is what's known as a parameter block that you describe what your parameters should be and how to interact with them. Similarly, Python has the same thing. However, with that, you actually have to import a module in order to be able to create them. So can't remember why I put that XenoPython moment, but I think this is more of a explicit is better than implicit moment, but nonetheless, let's hit up our demo environment again here. So we're on our 6th version here. Let's get into, Python 3. So over here on the left-hand side, we have a script. We have our parameter block that's up here. We're defining our variables or what our parameters should be, I'm sorry. So in this case, we're saying that the top one is true. We're going to set it to line up with a org variable name, and then it's going to be org as the actual parameter. Similarly, underneath that, we have a name, and we have decided that this will not be something that's mandatory. So if I can remember exactly where I stashed this. Oh no, I've got the help there from VS Code. So documents in my GitHub repo. Yeah, example 6, PS1. So if we do a git help, which displays out the things that are available for the resource that you're trying to work with. Here, I didn't even create any other help documentation for this. This was strictly for this example. We can see our org parameter that lines up with our org up here, as well as our name that lines up with that one right there. Now on the Python side, it's a little more detailed. So we're going to go ahead and import a couple things. Oh, no, actually, I didn't want to go into the Python console. So to call a Python script, assuming that you're calling it from bash, you have to tell your terminal session what you want to use to interpret the file that you're calling. In this case, Python 3. The same thing happens over on the left-hand side of the screen here. So if I wanted to call that PowerShell command and I wasn't already in a Power terminal, I would just have to say pwsh, which is the PowerShell core shortened version of calling out PowerShell, and then the script. So over here on back to the right-hand side, we'll call out to where our script lives. So documents, GitHub, vBrownBag, x6py. It is hidden behind my GoToWebinar control panel, but if we use the -h, that's how we call out help on the Python side. Oh, I actually didn't show our arguments here, I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself. I was too excited to show the demo. So here's what the code looks like. So we're importing our arg parse. This is something that's built in, at least it was for me. It's just a very nice way to handle parameters and argument input. So then within our class here, we can see using our arg parse module that we imported, and we're calling out our argument parser, storing that in parser. And then for each one of these, we are adding in some sort of argument. So on the Python side, we can also give it two different ways to call out the argument to the parameter. So we can either give it a shortened one with a -r, or a much longer one, which is -- refresh token. We can give it some additional information, such as hey, this script exists for a VMware Cloud on AWS script that I've been writing and creating for VMworld. So there's a refresh token. We can go down to our next one here. It's got shortened is -o, longer is -- org ID. We still have our required true or false, just like what PowerShell was showing. SSD or SDDC ID, and then finally we kind of take all of these arguments that we've created, and we call out parse args, which basically is just creating that output that we see down here. Let's see, and then so once we have them, we call that in, and we have a variable that we can work with here called args.refresh token. Which matches up with our refresh token here. And then we're storing that in a self variable, a self object. So we've got refresh token, org ID, SDDC ID. Assuming we input all of those things, then we can start working with those variables. So like right here, we're calling out our refresh token to establish our connectivity to our VMware Cloud on AWS environment. So the purpose behind this was that, showing how these arguments kind of work. On the PowerShell side, we have our, just dash and then whatever it is. On the Python side, we can define either or. And they both work out in the same exact fashion. -r refresh token, -- refresh token. Still looking for your refresh token. Still the same thing. Oh my, I just noticed the time. We have 10 minutes left.
You can do it. We believe in you.
I have confidence in myself as much as you all do in me. Okay, so this is the one that we already called. Let's quickly talk about key value pairs. This is something that actually PowerShell and Python are very closely related to, which is kind of why I decided to discuss it in this session. So on the PowerShell side, we have what's known as a hash table. On the Python side, we have, oh, come on, there we go. It's what's known as a dictionary. No XenoPython moment there because they're, like I said, they're pretty closely aligned there. So for our key value pair on our PowerShell side, we're going to create a variable that contains a hash table. Hash tables are defined by the @ symbol and curly brackets. Then within that, we're creating some pieces, some key value pairs for who the presenter is, which is me, which, we have key of name, which is Kyle, key of blog for kmruddy.com, and then distinguishing feature, which is being put as feature and set to beard. So if we go ahead and copy this and toss that down there, we now have our presenter variable completed. If we do a write output there, here is how that looks in the PowerShell world if we try and write that out to the screen. What happens if we want to work with just a particular value? So in this case, we only want the name. We only care about the presenter's name, or the key for that one particular variable. So we can just call out $presenter.name, or call out the .key that we're looking for. Furthermore, what happens if we want just the values themselves? So we can call out $presenter.values. Now the one thing that I want to call out here is that if you notice from before, we defined it a little differently when it comes to order. When this, put it out to the screen here, displayed it on the screen, it's beard, kmruddy.com, and Kyle. So it kind of is not aligned to the way that we, oh, I already cleared it, it's gone. Here, old sheet. So it doesn't kind of match up with the way that we created it. So it's alphabetically here by our key value, or by our key name, I should say. So what if we want to print only a specific value? So in this case, we're looking to verify that a particular key exists, and then based upon that existing, we're going to write something out to the screen. So in this case, a blog key was found in our situation there, and the value is kmruddy.com. Oh, the fun of doing it live.
Need a space.
Yep, spaces are overrated. Readability, who needs it? So what happens if we need to change a value in our hash table here? We can use, just call out the variable, square brackets, followed by inputting the key name, and then giving it what the new value should be. So personally, I live in Tampa, Florida, so it is not uncommon for people to refer to me also as Florida Man. So we can change my distinguishing feature from being a beard to being Florida Man just by that input. So now if we take a look at our presenter variable values, feature has been changed from beard to Florida Man. So let's now take a look at it from the Python side. So again, our variables are not created with $signs or anything else. We can go directly into the variable name itself. Sorry, I need to be back in our Python terminal here. So we've input that. One of the things that I didn't compare here. So over here on the PowerShell side, notice there's no, it's just straight equal sign, whatever the value is, and then enter. On the Python side, we have our key name. We have a colon, and then our value, followed by a comma, to kind of delineate between the keys that are being input. If you kind of look at it, it looks mighty similar to JSON in how that format is. So now that we've input our host variable here, we can do our print, outputs, again, very, very JSON formatting. However, like I said earlier, the it keeps the order. It doesn't change the order in the way that it was input. It maintains that order. So what happens if we want to get just a particular value, in this case for name, since we're doing Joe, call that just the name. So this is exactly the same way that we were able to do it over here. We call out our variable, square brackets, and then calling out the key name. So same thing here. We have our host variable, square brackets, name. Oh no, don't do whatever you're doing. Undo for the win. So there's also a couple different ways to interact with this. Host, the variable, the dictionary also has a method. Actually has a couple methods that's assigned to it, but we're going to use get. So as part of that, we can use the get method to specify the name, again, the key that we're looking for there. And again, we get Joe. So let's quickly hear what happens if we want to print out all the values. Very similar to what we did on the PowerShell side. And we see Joe, full stack geek, and then hat because, well, I've seen Joe without a hat probably once, and it was weird. So what happens if we want to then call out, try and figure out if a specific key exists. So therefore, we're using an if statement. We're looking for if blog is contained within the host variable there. We're going to print out the same thing that we did over on the PowerShell side. So here we can see a blog key was found. The value is fullstackgeek.net. And then lastly, what happens if we want to change that? Maybe Joe was offended that I, have basically never seen him without a hat. We can change it because he's from Texas. So let's say that he's known for barbecue. So we'll change our feature key name to have a value of barbecue. So if we now reprint out host, there towards the end, feature now has a value of barbecue.
That's better than I was expecting. I thought you were going to say if I wasn't known for my hat, I was known for my eating. So
I try not to be cruel.
it's the truth.
That's just mean. Yeah, but you can make that joke. I don't want to make that joke.
So Kyle,
Yes.
Graham is curious to know, is implicit use of the method the better way to do it?
In Python.
Great question. I actually don't know. I would have to assume, like in most languages, it's probably your mileage may vary. So test for your situations and scenarios. There's never a guarantee that one thing is going to be faster than the other. But normally methods are going to be faster.
And I would say even just being explicit about what it is you're trying to do, somebody else that's reading your code can actually see that you're trying to get that value, because you might be trying to get the value rather than just display it to the console or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Yep.
Bringing it back to the Zen of Python, right?
There you go. All right, so last big thing that I wanted to cover, conditional statements. I've again broken that cardinal rule of showing things before actually explaining them, but hopefully you have at least a fundamental idea of some of the things that I've shown so far. So on the PowerShell side, things that are you have your if statement, and then if that is true, you then have the commands that are going to run because that was true. And so you have to put those commands into a script block. But on the Python side, this actually makes use of the indentation. This is kind of a simplicity type deal where, it's indented, it's something that's required, so that's what's going to happen. So let's go back to our VS Code here. Oh my. Sorry, my monitors really don't like when I leave PowerPoint in display mode. Okay, so example 8 here. So on the left-hand side, we have A, which we're going to store it as Joe, and B, which we're going to store as Kyle. Then we have our visually appealing indent, which we kind of discussed, but we're going to use an if block. So we're going to compare A versus B, trying to see if A, the string of Joe is equal to the string of Kyle. Note here that we're using a dash EQ for equals, and then we have our squirrely brackets here for to create our script block. And then within that script block, assuming that if statement is true, we're going to write something out to the screen. So here we receive nothing back, which means that probably a good chance that those two things are not equal. Oops, these are all wrong. These are all supposed to be not equal. Apologies for that.
One of these things is not like the other.
One of these things is not equal to the other.
There we go. So now if we change my statement to be the actual proper thing, we can see that A and B do not equal one another. So the host and the presenter are different. And the host happens to be the A value, which is Joe, and the presenter is the B value, which is output to the screen as Kyle. Again, I've kind of already showed this, so I'll briefly go over it. No indents, same output. Now, if we want to get really crazy and not use indents at all, you can just do a one-liner. Oops, forgot to change that to equal or not equal. There we go. So just in one single line, we get the same output. And then another thing that could be an issue here, we've been using double quotes here for the entire time. Punctuation is a very important part of both PowerShell as well as Python. But if we change our single or our double quotes to single quotes, we have a different response. So our if value is still, it's true. A is not equal to B, but it's our output is written to the screen in a very different manner. And then since we're already over time, I won't run through the if else, but basically, you can run this. You can have if, you can have if else, you can have else, and continue running through those. So returning over to our Python side over here. We will create our variables. I had the Python side right. So there we see the host and presenter are different because A does not equal to B. But so what happens if we use the wrong indent there? We get hey, we expected an indented block here, and it's just not there. What else do we want to do here? So we can also kind of cheat the indent by doing a shortcut here. So on a one single line, we can get the same output here. One thing that, as I'm looking at this now, so the difference in the way also, since I'm putting two lines within the same print or same write to screen usage here, PowerShell, it's the tilde n, this little jobby right here. For Python, it's /n. So just a little bit of nuance that's a little different. So I'm going to skip that one example. Let's run through what happens if we use single quotes. So we're still using the shortcut. However, in Python, didn't change. Our output is still the same. Oh, sorry, I remember what this one's for. So there's also multiple ways to output your variables. Inject your variables into strings for output. So far, I've been doing a plus a, or plus variable name plus, and then diving back into the string. You can also separate it out by commas. However, I guess I will run through this because it's show you the difference in spacing. Since I kind of flubbed up the spacing on the PowerShell side, let's show you what happens on the Python side. So we have our, the output is basically the same, but over here, look at the period, look at the end here, because when you're using the commas to source your text, it injects a space before and after. All right, because this got crazy complicated, there's also another way to output your strings, which is a f string. So in another case, we have print, then we have our f for format, and then we put in what we needed there. Then we just put in curly brackets here and call out a and b for where those variables should live. So running this, again, we get, our if statement is already true, we know that. But we have, host and presenter are different, matches up exactly, and we don't have to worry about the weird spacing or anything of that nature. Very last one to show, which is called string interpolation. This basically means that you inject your curly brackets here, and then do a dot format and call out where those variables should live. Let's see if this works right. Yep. So in this case, it reversed. So I put B first and I put A second. So it goes in order that you put in through the format.
So in this case, really similar to the -f operator for PowerShell then, right?
Yes, extremely similar. And then the last one was just an if-else statement. If, else. The one difference is for if-else, it's, what is it, elif, just ELIF. So with that, since I'm already 8 minutes over time, one of the really big resources that has definitely helped me connect some dots is a book called PowerShell Guide to Python. It has like 14 or 15, maybe even 16 different chapters, kind of going through some of the nuances that I discussed, most of the time going into a lot more depth, as well as covering a whole plethora of other topics and considerations as well.
It's even bigger now, it's like 22.
Do what?
I said it's even bigger now, it's up to about 22.
22, wow.
Yeah.
He's been putting in work.
Oh yeah.
So highly recommend going out to LeanPub. That's where it's been published, and showing some love there. It's a great book. It is actually so great. For whatever reason, I somehow bought it twice. I don't know how that works, but I have 2 receipts, so I definitely paid for it twice. So, and no, I won't share it. recommend buying your own.
The beard is now stealing your credit card.
That's true, man. The beard needed its own copy. It was that good.
Nice.
So I'm gonna skip over the one more thing, because that's kind of the Skunkworks project, but probably safer to not show it. Hit me up on Twitter if you want to know what's going on. I'm more than happy to share what's happening with the Python SDK for vSphere's REST APIs. However, since we're a couple weeks before VMworld, if you happen to watch this in the month of August, and you're, or even really if you're watching this after the month of August of 2019, all of these sessions that are up on the screen are all happening at VMworld, and they will all be online and available to watch for free. So if you're going to be at VMworld, absolutely stop by these sessions. The top one is myself and Cody Diarklin, where we did a very similar session last year. However, this year we're kind of changing it up and taking more of a vSphere-centric approach to it. And then the second one here is for VMware Cloud on AWS. Myself and William Lamb are going to be showing some advanced automation techniques, which may or may not include the Skunkworks stuff that I've been trying to be working on with some of our engineers. However, even if vSphere and that type of deal isn't your thing, there's plenty of other sessions on that are Python based to watch and kind of take in. That should be really good and really fun to watch. So with that, this is me again. Feel free, reach out. I'm more than happy to help fill in any blanks, do whatever. So with that, thank you to everybody that joined us today. Thank you to Joe and Ken for being gracious hosts and not heckling me anywhere near as much as Ariel probably has done in the chats. So with that, thank you, and I'll hand it back over to Joe to close it out.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for attending, everybody. Had some good interaction and quite a few good questions. I know I definitely learned some stuff and picked up some things I need to go back and look for when I'm starting to learn Python myself now. Ken, anything you've seen for open questions we haven't gotten yet?
I think we handled it all. So thank you to everybody who participated tonight. You can always, reach out to Kyle Ruddy on Twitter with any follow-up questions, or Joe, but don't at me, as the millennials say.
DM Kyle, he might be nice and give you his VMware email address. You can submit bugs directly to him. Just kidding. All right,
you bring it up. So I do have to say, most of these SDKs are out on GitHub. They are open source. You are more than willing and able to open up issues against them.
Yeah.
But if it is a bug that you don't feel, you don't want to share publicly, or for whatever particular reasons, the end result is quality code. So please do share it with me if you don't want to share that publicly in an issue.
I have heard that if you ask nicely, that you will fix scripts for free. So, not calling you out, just saying you're a really good guy for helping out the community. So yes, people, if you need help, reach out. There are tons of available resources, even to the level of Kyle actually taking a look at it to help you out. Don't abuse it. Alrighty, thanks y'all.